When I first moved into the neighborhood, I didn't think much about the HOA. I figured it was just one of those administrative boards that sent newsletters and handled landscaping bills. I bought the property mostly because of the view. A quiet stretch of land on the edge of the valley framed by pine trees and a winding gravel drive that led down to the main county road. I'd laid that gravel myself over a decade earlier, long before the subdivision even existed, when the county hired me as a civilian contractor to design and build service routes for the U.S. military's logistics division. Every layer of that road had a purpose. The compacted base to handle vehicle weight, the slope designed for runoff, the gravel itself meant to last through heat, frost, and rain. I built it like I built every other road in my career, to last. So when a new HOA board came into power, led by a man named Greg with a reputation for nitpicking every blade of grass, I didn't think my driveway would be what set him off. I was wrong. It started with a letter, typed in all caps, stamped with the HOA seal, and phrased like an official summons. You are hereby fined $5,000 for unapproved gravel surfacing. You have 7 days to remove the material or face additional penalties. I read it 3 times before setting it down on my kitchen table. My wife raised an eyebrow. They're fining you for gravel? She asked. I nodded. Apparently, she knew me well enough to see the faint smirk on my face. I didn't get angry. I just started thinking. I'd seen bureaucratic overreach before. I'd worked with county inspectors, federal engineers, even base commanders who thought their badge meant they knew everything. I learned early in my career that the loudest man in the room is usually the least informed. 2 days later, Greg himself came by. He stood at the edge of my driveway, clipboard in hand, acting like he was inspecting a construction site. This material, he said, toeing the gravel with his polished shoe, doesn't match our neighborhood standards. I asked him if he'd like to see my permits. He laughed. That smug, patronizing laugh that makes you want to hand someone a lesson they'll never forget. You can't permit unapproved materials, he said. This isn't county land. This is HOA jurisdiction. That's when I knew exactly how this was going to go. I thanked him for stopping by and went back to my shop without another word. That happening. I opened my old project archives. Dusty binders filled with maps, permits, and signatures from decades of infrastructure work. I found the one labeled Project 47B. County Road Access Route, Northern Sector. Inside were all the documents that tied my property to the public access easement. D helped design. According to the maps, the stretch of gravel Greg was complaining about wasn't technically part of my private lot. It was part of a registered county service route under federal jurisdiction, built and approved during a defense infrastructure expansion nearly 15 years earlier. That meant no HOA, no private entity, and no homeowner board had any authority over it. In fact, any attempt to alter it could be considered tampering with government infrastructure. The next morning I drove down to the county office and met with an old colleague, Mark, who'd since become the regional infrastructure supervisor. I showed him the fine and the attached photos the HOA had taken. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. They fined you for this. You realize this is part of the military logistics easement, right? This isn't even under their zoning. He promised to make a few calls. I told him I'd handle it quietly. I just needed official confirmation in writing. Within a week, I had it. A signed statement from the county declaring that the road, gravel, and all was federally protected infrastructure, still registered as a maintained easement. That's when I drafted my letter, 3 pages, written in calm, factual language, attached with county maps, signatures, and photos. I sent copies to the HOA board, their attorney, and the local zoning office. The letter opened with one line. The property referenced in your violation notice falls under federal and county jurisdiction, not HOA governance. Your fine constitutes an unlawful claim over government infrastructure. 2 days later, Greg showed up again, but the swagger was gone. He didn't even make it halfway up my driveway before stopping. There's been some confusion, he started, his voice cracking slightly. We didn't realize the easement extended this far. I let him talk for a bit, then handed him a copy of the county's letter. He skimmed it, turned pale. and muttered something about needing to discuss this with the board. He left without another word. Within a week, the HOA withdrew the fine. Within 2, they were instructed by the county to remove a small decorative retaining wall they'd built that overlapped the easement by nearly 3 feet. Watching their hired crew dismantle it, under county supervision, was more satisfying than I'd like to admit. A month later, Greg resigned as president, citing personal stress. Now, years later, that same stretch of gravel still sits exactly as I built it, solid, level, and perfectly functional. Every car in this neighborhood drives over it daily, including the new HOA president, who gives me a polite wave every time she passes. Most of the neighbors down T know the full story. They just know the HOA. Doesn't T mess with me anymore, and they shouldn't. Because what they once called unapproved gravel wasn't just a driveway. It was a piece of government-grade infrastructure, built by someone who knew how to handle both roads and bureaucrats. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a fight. All I needed was patience, documentation, and the truth. And in the end, it wasn't the fine that got buried. It was their arrogance, right under the same gravel they tried to take from me.